The Mafia boss's hand shot out and caught her wrist. His dead wife had that exact scar branded into her skin, and she'd been murdered 2 years ago. His grip tightened as the color drained from his face, his voice dropping to something lethal. My wife, Isabella, had this identical mark, down to every raised edge, and someone shot her twice in the chest for what she knew about it. The auction house went silent as he leaned closer, his thumb pressing against the scar like he could resurrect the dead through it. And when he spoke again, everyone in the room held their breath. "So you're going to tell me right now, who are you really? And why are you walking around Chicago wearing my dead wife's brand?" The panic attack had hit me on the L train. 20 minutes of white-knuckled breathing exercises while tourists complained about delays. 6 months in this city. 6 months since I'd left the wreckage of my doctoral program, and the professor who'd made sure I'd never finish it. And I still couldn't ride public transportation without my chest tightening. The warmth of the auction house wrapped around me like expensive perfume. Soft lighting glinted off the marble floors, casting everything in the golden glow that only old money could buy. The space was nearly empty. Just a handful of collectors scattered among the velvet ropes that protected this month's featured pieces. Italian Renaissance, naturally. Low classical music drifted from hidden speakers, mixing with the hushed conversations and the soft tread of designer shoes on polished stone. I made my way past a Caravaggio study, peeling off my coat and draping it over my arm. My hands were still unsteady, the residual tremor from the attack refusing to fade. The auction coordinator gave me a subtle nod of recognition. I'd been here often enough in my role as a junior curator that my presence raised no questions. That's what I'd built here. A life where I raised no questions. "Ms. Bellwether." The coordinator appeared at my elbow, her black suit immaculate despite the early hour. She looked me over with the practiced discretion of someone trained never to acknowledge discomfort. "The Bronzino is in the East Gallery. Shall I bring you the condition report?" "No need," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Just browsing today." She nodded once and glided away. I pressed my fingertips against the cool velvet rope, trying to ground myself in something tactile. Something real. The Caravaggio's subjects stared back at me with Renaissance judgment. I'd spent so many years studying faces like this, learning to read the symbolism in every shadow and gesture, but I'd never learned to read the dangers in my own life until it was too late. My hand drifted unconsciously to my left wrist, fingertips brushing against the edge of my sleeve where the scar hid beneath the fabric. The small raised symbol, a stylized star inside a circle, had been there for so long I barely noticed it anymore. Sister Margaret had pressed the brand into my skin when I was 7, in the basement chapel of the Sisters of Silence. "So God always knows his own," she'd whispered while I screamed. I never forgot, but I'd spent 18 years trying to. I reached for a bidding paddle from the display stand, checking the lot number for a Titian sketch I had no intention of bidding on. Just the motion of normalcy. Just the performance of someone who belonged here. That's when the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't dramatic. Not at first. Just a subtle change in the energy of the room, like the air pressure dropping before a storm breaks. The hushed conversations at the nearby stations grew quieter. The coordinator straightened near the entrance, her professional demeanor replaced with something sharper, more alert. Even the music seemed to quiet, though I knew that was impossible. Then the brass doors opened. 4 men entered, but only one commanded the space. He was tall, easily 6'3", with jet black hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Roman coin. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, olive skin that caught the golden gallery light and turned it into something dangerous. His navy suit fit him with the precision that came from Italian tailoring and serious money. Every line emphasized broad shoulders and a lean, powerful build. But it wasn't his appearance that made my breath catch in my throat. It was the way everyone else reacted. The coordinator moved immediately toward him without being summoned. The elderly collector examining a Botticelli sketch stepped back unconsciously. A younger couple near the Caravaggio fell silent mid-sentence. The security guard by the east entrance shifted his weight, suddenly more attentive. The man moved through the auction house with absolute authority, flanked by 3 companions. One was older, silver-haired, with the watchful posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime protecting valuable things. Another was tall and heavy-built, his expensive suit doing nothing to hide the violence in his frame. The third was leaner, with cold eyes that swept the room in constant methodical assessment, cataloging exits, angles, threats. They were heading toward the private consultation rooms at the back when the lean one spoke. So quietly I almost missed it. Just 2 words and a subtle gesture. But the effect was immediate. The man in the navy suit stopped walking, turned. His gaze followed the direction his companion indicated. Toward me. I froze, the bidding paddle still in my hand, my left wrist exposed where my sleeve had pulled back when I'd reached for it. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that felt physical, like being caught in a spotlight. But it wasn't my face he was looking at. It was the scar. The small, raised symbol on my inner wrist, now fully visible under the gallery lights. A stylized star inside a circle. Unmistakable. Impossible to explain. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then he crossed the marble floor toward me with the kind of focused purpose that made my pulse spike into panic territory. His companions followed at a precisely measured distance. Close enough to act, far enough to let him lead. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My carefully constructed life, my invisible existence, the walls I'd built between my past and my present, all of it collapsing in the seconds it took him to close the distance between us. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive with notes of bergamot and leather. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was low, controlled, and absolutely lethal. "Don't move!" It wasn't a request. His hand shot out and caught my wrist. Not violently, but with unshakable authority. His thumb pressed directly against the scar, his skin warm against mine as he turned my arm toward the light, examining it, confirming what he'd seen from across the room. The color drained from his face. Something flickered in those dark eyes. Recognition, shock, grief, rage, all of it compressed into a single, devastating moment. "Where did you get this?" His grip tightened, not enough to hurt. Just enough to make it clear I wouldn't be leaving until he had answers. "Tell me where you got this mark." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The auction house had gone completely silent. Every eye in the room was on us, but no one dared intervene. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. But there was nothing soft about it, nothing safe. My wife had a scar exactly like this. Exactly. His eyes searched mine with desperate intensity. "She's been dead for 2 years. His thumb pressed harder against the brand, as if he could will it to disappear, or will it to explain itself. "So I'm going to ask you one more time." His jaw tightened. "Who are you really?" And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that my old life, the quiet one, the invisible one, the one where I controlled my own fate, was over. The private consultation room had probably been designed to make wealthy clients feel pampered. Cream silk wallpaper, a mahogany conference table polished to a mirror shine, recessed lighting that cast everything in flattering warmth. But with Al Rossi standing between me and the only exit, his 3 companions positioned like chess pieces around the perimeter, it felt exactly like what it was. A very expensive cage. They'd moved me here with terrifying efficiency. No scene, no struggle. Just the lean one's hand at my elbow, and the coordinator's practiced smile as she assured the staring collectors that everything was fine. Just a private matter. Please continue browsing. I'd gone because the alternative, screaming for help in front of Chicago's elite, while a man who clearly owned half the city stood calmly waiting, seemed infinitely worse. Al hadn't said a word during the 30-second walk. Now he stood across the table from me, his hands flat against the mahogany. His dark eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The silver-haired man was by the door, the heavy-built one near the window. The lean one had disappeared, which somehow made him more frightening. "Sit," Al said. I sat, not because I wanted to obey, but because my legs were shaking so badly I wasn't sure they'd hold me much longer. He reached into his jacket. I flinched, hating myself for it, and withdrew a slim leather portfolio. He opened it carefully, almost reverently, and slid a photograph across the table toward me. My breath caught. The woman in the photo was beautiful. Dark hair cascading over bare shoulders, olive skin glowing in golden light, red lips curved in a smile that belonged at a wedding or an anniversary. But it was her wrist I couldn't stop staring at. The scar. The exact same stylized star inside a circle, raised and deliberate, positioned on her inner left wrist like a brand of ownership. Like mine. "Isabella Rossi," Al said, his voice rough. "My wife. She died 26 months and 13 days ago." He slid another photo across. Isabella in a white sundress laughing. Another. Isabella with her arms around Al, her face pressed against his shoulder. Another. Isabella's hand resting on a table, the scar clearly visible under restaurant lighting. She never told me where she got that mark. Every time I asked, she'd change the subject. Say it was from childhood. Say it didn't matter. He slid one final photo toward me, and this time I had to close my eyes. It was a morgue photo. Isabella's face, pale and still, her eyes closed. The scar on her wrist now surrounded by the sterile documentation of violent death. She was shot twice in the chest in a parking garage on Wacker Drive, Al continued, his tone flat in the way voices get when grief has worn grooves too deep for emotion. No witnesses, no cameras, professional hit. The kind of execution you use when you want to send a message without leaving evidence. I forced my eyes open. Forced myself to look at him instead of the photos. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't know what—" "You have the same scar." He leaned forward, his knuckles white against the table. "Not similar, not kind of like hers. Identical, down to the exact dimensions and placement. That's not a tattoo some artist copied. That's a brand. A specific, deliberate mark made by someone who wanted it to last forever." My throat tightened. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. "So you're going to tell me," Al said quietly, dangerously, "exactly where you got it, who gave it to you, and why you're walking around my city wearing my dead wife's scar on your arm." The silence stretched between us like a blade. I could lie. I'd gotten good at lying over the years, at constructing careful stories that explained away the things I didn't want to talk about. But looking at those photos, at the evidence of Isabella's violent death, at the grief carved into every line of Al's face, I couldn't. "The Sisters of Silence," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's a Catholic institution. Was. I don't know if it still exists. I was placed there when I was 5 years old. They called it a home for displaced children, but it was more like a prison." Al's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "Outside Rockford, in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place nobody asks questions about." My fingers found the scar on my wrist, tracing the raised edges through my sleeve. "They branded us when we turned 7. Sister Margaret did the actual marking. She'd heat the iron in the chapel basement and press it into our skin while Father Dominic read verses about belonging to God. The heavy-built man by the window shifted, his expression darkening. Al held up one hand, a subtle gesture that froze everyone in place, and kept his eyes locked on mine. "How many children?" he asked. "I don't know, 30, 40. We weren't allowed to talk to each other except during meals and recreation. They kept us separated by age and gender. The younger ones downstairs, the older ones on the 3rd floor. I was there for 12 years before—" I stopped, the memory catching in my throat. "Before I was adopted out." "And Isabella?" The way he said her name, careful, precious, like speaking it too roughly might shatter something, made my chest ache. "I don't know." I met his eyes, willing him to believe me. "I swear to you, I never met anyone named Isabella. They didn't use our real names there. We were all called by saint names. I was Cecilia. There were 3 other girls in my age group, Agnes, Catherine, and Lucia. But there were other groups, other floors. If your wife was there—" I paused, thinking. How old was she when she died? 29? I did the math quickly. Then she would have been 7 around the same time I was. Different floor, maybe. We might have been branded the same year and never even seen each other. Al stared at me for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. Then he reached into the portfolio again and pulled out another photo. This one was older, the edges yellowed with age. A group of children standing in front of a gray stone building with narrow windows. They looked hollow, haunted. "Isabella kept this hidden in a safety deposit box," Al said. "I didn't find it until after she died. It was the only thing in there except for her passport and a burner phone with no calls logged." He turned the photo toward me, and my stomach dropped. I recognized the building immediately. The Sisters of Silence. The same crucifix over the entrance. The same dead garden where we'd been forced to pray every morning regardless of weather. And there, in the back row, so small I almost missed her, a girl with dark hair and enormous eyes. "That's her," Al said. "Age 7. 3 months before we have any other record of Isabella's existence." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, because if Isabella had been at the Sisters of Silence, if she'd been branded like I had, if she'd somehow escaped or been adopted out like I had, she was investigating something, I said slowly. Wasn't she? That's why she had that burner phone. That's why she kept this photo hidden. Al's expression turned cold. "What do you know about what she was investigating?" "Nothing, I swear. I haven't thought about that place in years. I've spent my entire adult life trying to forget it existed." "Well, you're going to start remembering." Al straightened, buttoning his jacket with precise, controlled movements. "Because whoever killed Isabella did it to stop her from exposing something. And now you're walking around with the same marks she had, which means whoever killed her is going to notice you eventually." The implications settled over me like ice water. "They're going to come for you," Al continued. "And when they do, I'm going to be there to find out why, which means you're coming with me. Now." "I'm not going anywhere with you," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew how hollow they sounded. Al smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You think you have a choice? You think I'm asking?" He gestured to the silver-haired man by the door. "Marco will collect whatever you need from your apartment. Give him your address." "This is kidnapping. This is protection." Al leaned down, his hands flat on the table again, his face inches from mine. "Your life ended the moment I saw that scar. You just don't know it yet. The people who killed Isabella are still out there. They're connected, they're ruthless, and they clearly have unfinished business with whatever happened at that institution. So you can come with me voluntarily, stay alive, and help me figure out what my wife died trying to expose. Or I whispered. His eyes were black and bottomless. Or I leave you here to wait for them alone. See how long you survive. The lean one reappeared in the doorway, phone in hand. He looked at Al and nodded once. The car's ready, Al said, straightening. Let's go. I looked at the photos still spread across the table. Isabella smiling. Isabella dead. The children in front of the Sisters of Silence, branded and broken. My old life, the quiet one, the safe one, had been an illusion anyway. Maybe it always had been. I stood on shaking legs. Fine, but I'm not your prisoner. No, Al agreed, his hand already guiding me toward the door. You're my insurance policy. There's a difference. The heavy-built one opened the exit that led to the private garage, and I stepped through it, leaving the auction house and its golden light behind. Al's hand never left my back, not rough but utterly unyielding, as he walked me toward a black SUV with tinted windows. I caught one final glimpse of the Chicago skyline before the door closed and the locks engaged with a decisive click. Whatever came next, I was already trapped in it. Al's mansion sat in Lincoln Park like a fortress disguised as elegance. Stone exterior, wrought iron gates, windows that probably cost more than my entire year's salary. The kind of place that whispered old money and older secrets. We'd driven in silence for 20 minutes, Al beside me in the back seat, his presence heavy and watchful. The lean one drove. The heavy-built one followed in a second vehicle. Marco, the silver-haired man, had disappeared to collect my things. A violation I was trying very hard not to think about. The SUV pulled through gates that closed behind us with automatic finality. Up a circular drive lined with manicured hedges that looked severe even in November's dying light. The front entrance was all dark wood and beveled glass, the kind of door that required 2 hands to open. A woman in her 60s met us in the foyer. Elegant gray hair pulled back, sharp eyes that missed nothing, hands clasped in front of a black dress that looked like uniform and armor combined. Mrs. Chen, Al said, his tone shifting to something almost gentle. This is Clara Bellwether. She'll be staying in the East Wing. Make sure she has everything she needs. Mrs. Chen's gaze flickered to me, cataloging and assessing in the span of a breath. Of course, Mr. Rossi. Shall I prepare the blue room? Something passed across Al's face. A shadow. A hesitation. No, the rose room. Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change, but I saw the slight stiffening of her shoulders, a reaction to something I didn't understand. She nodded once. I'll have fresh linens brought up. Thank you. Al turned to me, and suddenly we were alone in the marble foyer with its soaring ceiling and crystal chandelier. His companions had vanished like smoke. Mrs. Tong, Chen will show you to your room. You're not a prisoner, but you're not free to leave. The grounds are monitored. The gates are locked. If you try to run, I'll know before you reach the street. How comforting, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. His jaw tightened. This isn't about comfort. This is about keeping you alive long enough to find out what Isabella died for. He started toward a hallway on the left, then paused. Dinner is at 7. You'll join me. It wasn't a question. Mrs. Chen touched my elbow gently, guiding me toward the curved staircase. This way, Miss Bellwether. I followed her up polished marble steps, past oil paintings of landscapes I didn't recognize, and sconces that cast warm pools of light against cream walls. The house was beautiful in the way museums are beautiful. Perfectly curated, emotionally distant, every object placed with intention. We climbed to the second floor, turned left down a wide corridor with burgundy runner carpet, and stopped at the third door on the right. The rose room, Mrs. Chen said, opening the door. I stepped inside and immediately understood Al's hesitation. The room was stunning. 4-poster bed with cream silk bedding, antique vanity with an oval mirror, French doors leading to a small balcony overlooking the gardens. But it was the details that caught in my throat. A woman's silk robe draped over a chair by the window. A book on the nightstand. Bookmark still in place. Perfume bottles on the vanity, their glass catching the fading daylight. A framed photo on the dresser. Isabella in a summer dress, laughing at whoever held the camera. This had been her room. Mr. Rossi hasn't touched Mrs. Rossi's belongings since she passed, Mrs. Chen said quietly. He asked me to prepare one of the guest suites for you initially, but... She trailed off, her professional mask slipping slightly. I think perhaps he needs to see someone living here again, even if it's painful. My chest tightened. I can stay somewhere else. I don't need... There is nowhere else that would be safe. Mrs. Chen's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw genuine concern there. Whatever you're involved in, Miss Bellwether, it killed a good woman. Mr. Rossi may seem harsh, but everything he does now, he does for her memory. She moved toward the door, then paused. The bathroom is through there, fresh towels in the closet. If you need anything, there's an intercom by the bed. Dinner is at 7 in the main dining room. Don't be late. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that made my pulse spike. I stood in the center of Isabella's room and tried to breathe. The silence was oppressive. I could hear my own heartbeat, the faint tick of a clock somewhere, the distant sound of traffic beyond the gates. But inside these walls, it felt like being underwater, like the house itself was holding its breath. I moved to the vanity, my fingers hovering over the perfume bottles. Expensive labels, French names I couldn't pronounce. I picked one up, a heavy crystal bottle with gold detailing, and lifted the stopper. The scent hit me immediately. Jasmine and amber, warm and sophisticated. I set it down quickly, feeling like I'd violated something sacred. The photo on the dresser drew me next. Isabella looked younger here, maybe mid-20s. Her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She was standing in front of a fountain somewhere European. Rome, maybe? Or Florence. Her smile was genuine, unguarded, the kind of expression people only wore when they felt safe. I wondered what had happened to that safety. What had driven her from survivor of the Sisters of Silence to the wife of a mafia boss to a woman murdered in a parking garage. The book on the nightstand was a collection of poetry. Neruda. A bookmark rested at a poem titled, "If You Forget Me." I didn't open it. Couldn't. The French doors called to me, and I stepped out onto the small balcony. The November air bit through my thin sweater immediately, but I welcomed the cold. It felt real, grounding. The gardens below were precise and dormant, waiting for spring that seemed impossibly far away. Beyond the stone walls, I could see the distant lights of the city. My city. The life I'd built there now impossibly out of reach. She used to stand there for hours. I spun around. Al stood in the doorway, still in his suit but with his jacket gone, his tie loosened. He looked exhausted, human suddenly, in a way he hadn't in the auction house or the car. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "I shouldn't have..." "It's fine." He stepped into the room, his eyes moving over Isabella's belongings with the careful avoidance of someone who'd memorized every inch. Mrs. Chen was right. Someone should use this space. He crossed to the dresser and picked up the photo I'd been looking at. Florence, our honeymoon. She insisted on visiting every church and museum in the city. I thought I'd lose my mind. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She was happiest when she was looking at art. Said it made her feel clean somehow, like she could scrub away whatever came before. "The institution," I said quietly. I didn't know that's what she meant at the time. He set the photo down with careful precision. She never told me about the Sisters of Silence directly. Just fragments. Pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was supposed to solve. He turned to face me fully. 6 months before she died, she started acting different. Distracted. She'd disappear for hours with no explanation. I thought... His jaw clenched. I thought she was having an affair. The confession hung between us, raw and honest. What was she actually doing? I asked. Investigating. Al moved to the window, his reflection dark against the glass. After she died, I found a second phone hidden in her car. Encrypted emails. Meeting locations. She'd been in contact with someone. Another survivor, I think. Someone who told her the institution wasn't just about displaced children. That there was something else going on. Trafficking, maybe. Money laundering through the church. I don't know. The emails were vague, careful, like they both knew they were being watched. My stomach turned. Did you find out who she was meeting? No. The contact went dark the same week Isabella died. His reflection's eyes met mine in the glass. But I found something else. A list of names. Children's names, I think, from the institution. Most were crossed out. Dead, probably, or disappeared. But 3 weren't. 3 were circled in red. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to me. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant. Feminine. A list of perhaps 30 names in alphabetical order, written in fading blue ink. Most had neat lines drawn through them. But 3 were circled. Cecilia, Lucia, and Agnes. Those were the saint names, I whispered. The girls in my age group. Isabella circled them 2 weeks before she died, Al said. Which means she knew about you. She was looking for you. The paper trembled in my grip. Why? What did she want from us? Witnesses, maybe. People who could confirm what happened there. Or maybe she thought you knew something. Something about who ran the institution, who funded it, why they branded you all like property. He took the paper back, refolding it with the same careful precision he'd used with the photo. But she died before she could reach any of you. And now you're here, wearing the same mark she wore. Living in the same room she lived in. You think I'm in danger, I said. It wasn't a question. I know you are. Al's voice was flat, certain. Isabella's investigation got her killed. If her killers know she was looking for other survivors, they'll be looking too. To silence you before you can confirm whatever she found. The implications settled over me like a burial shroud. The other names, Lucia and Agnes, are they? I've already sent people to find them, Al interrupted. So far, nothing. Lucia might be dead. There's a traffic fatality from 3 years ago that matches the age profile. Agnes is a ghost. No records after age 18. I thought of the hollow-eyed children in that photograph. The girls I'd prayed beside, eaten beside, suffered beside. And now I'm the only one left. Now you're the only one I can protect. Al moved toward the door, then stopped. There's something else Isabella wrote, in her last email to the contact. She said, "The star knows where the bodies are buried." Mean anything to you? The star. I looked down at my wrist, at the raised scar burning beneath my sleeve. No, nothing. But even as I said it, something flickered at the edge of my memory. A basement chapel. Sister Margaret's voice. Father Dominic reading verses about stars and divine marks and children belonging to God's eternal plan. Al studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes seeing too much. You're lying. I'm not, I pressed my hand to my temple, trying to catch the memory before it dissolved. There was something. About the stars. But I can't remember. Then you'd better start trying. He opened the door. Because whatever Isabella died protecting, it's buried in that institution. And the only way we're going to find it is if you remember what they did to you there. He left, closing the door behind him with a soft click that felt like a cell locking. I sank onto Isabella's bed, surrounded by her perfume and her books and her ghost, and stared at the scar on my wrist until the light outside died completely, and the room filled with shadows. Somewhere in my fractured childhood memories, there was an answer, a key to whatever conspiracy had gotten Isabella Rossi murdered. And Al was right. If I didn't find it first, I'd be next. I didn't go down to dinner. Mrs. Chen knocked twice, her voice polite but firm through the door, but I told her I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't entirely a lie. My stomach was twisted in knots, my head pounding with the effort of trying to remember things I'd spent 18 years trying to forget. She left a tray outside the door, soup, bread, tea that went cold while I sat on Isabella's bed staring at the list of names Al had shown me. Cecilia, Lucia, Agnes. I'd been Cecilia, the quiet one, the one who learned early that silence was safer than speaking. Lucia had been small and fierce, with a gap between her front teeth and a habit of humming hymns under her breath during chores. Agnes had been older by almost a year, which at the institution meant she'd been our unspoken leader. She'd known which sisters to avoid, which prayers to recite when Father Dominic was watching, where to hide when the basement chapel door opened after midnight. I closed my eyes and tried to pull them into focus. Lucia's face, Agnes's voice. But it had been so long, and I'd worked so hard to bury those memories under layers of education and distance and carefully constructed normalcy. Now I needed them back, and they felt like smoke slipping through my fingers. The star knows where the bodies are buried. I turned the phrase over and over, trying to make it mean something. The star was clearly the scar, the mark we all shared. But what did Isabella mean about bodies? Was it literal? Had children died at the Sisters of Silence? Or was it metaphorical? Secrets buried? Evidence hidden? Around midnight, I finally forced myself to move. The room felt suffocating, Isabella's belongings watching me like silent accusations. I needed air. Space. Something other than these four walls and the weight of a dead woman's investigation pressing down on my chest. The mansion was quiet when I slipped into the hallway. Dim lighting along the baseboards cast long shadows across the burgundy carpet. I moved instinctively toward the stairs, then hesitated. Al had said I wasn't a prisoner, but I also wasn't free to leave. How much of this house was accessible? How closely was I being watched? Only one way to find out. I descended the curved staircase slowly, my hand trailing along the smooth banister. The foyer was empty, the chandelier dimmed to a soft glow. No sign of Mrs. Chen or Al's men. I turned left, following the hallway Al had taken earlier, and found myself in what appeared to be his private study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls. A massive desk dominated the center, its surface covered with papers and files, and a laptop that hummed quietly in sleep mode. The 4th wall was mostly windows overlooking the dark gardens, with a marble fireplace set between them. Above the mantel hung a portrait, Isabella in a red evening gown, her expression serene, her hands folded in her lap. The scar on her wrist was visible, painted with meticulous detail. I stepped closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. The artist had captured her perfectly. Not just her beauty, but something deeper. A sadness in her eyes that the smile on her lips couldn't hide. A woman who'd survived something terrible and was still surviving it, day by day, breath by breath. Couldn't sleep? I spun around. Al stood in the doorway, tie gone, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a glass of amber liquid in one hand. He didn't look surprised to find me here. Maybe he'd been expecting it. "I'm sorry," I said. "I just needed to—" "It's fine." He crossed to the fireplace and pressed something on the mantel. Gas flames sprang to life, casting dancing shadows across the room. I don't sleep much either anymore. He gestured to the portrait. Commissioned that 6 months after we married. She hated sitting for it. Said it made her feel like an object in a museum. But I wanted something permanent. Something that would outlast everything else. The irony of that statement hung heavy between us. He moved to the desk, set down his glass, and pulled out a thick file. I've been going through Isabella's research again, trying to find something I missed, some connection between the institution and her death. He looked at me, his dark eyes exhausted. You said there was something about the stars, in the chapel. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the fire. It's fragments, pieces. Father Dominic used to make us recite verses about being marked by God, about stars being divine symbols of belonging, but I can't remember the exact words. Try. I closed my eyes, forcing myself back into that basement chapel, the cold stone floor, the smell of incense and damp concrete. Sister Margaret heating the branding iron while Father Dominic spoke in his measured, hypnotic voice. Something about children of the morning star, I said slowly. How we were chosen. How the mark would protect us and identify us as belonging to God's eternal plan. He said we were special, that only the marked children would find their way home. Home where? I don't know. He never specified. We just assumed he meant heaven or salvation or whatever theological concept they were manipulating that week. I opened my eyes. But Isabella thought it meant something else, didn't she? Something literal. Al flipped through the file until he found a page covered in Isabella's elegant handwriting. She wrote this 3 weeks before she died. Father D's sermons weren't about salvation. They were instructions. The star is a map. Only the marked can read it. A map. The word triggered something in my memory. Faint, but insistent. There was a room, I said suddenly. In the institution. The sisters called it the Star Room. We were only allowed in there once a year, on the anniversary of our branding. They'd make us stand in a circle while Father Dominic read from some old book. The ceiling was painted with constellations. Al's attention sharpened. You remember which constellations? No. I was 7 the first time and terrified. I just remember staring at the floor, trying not to cry. But even as I said it, another memory surfaced. Agnes's voice whispered in the dormitory after lights out. Wait. Agnes used to sing something, a rhyme, about the stars and the secret door. What rhyme? I pressed my fingers to my temples, chasing the ghost of Agnes's voice through the dark corridors of memory. It went, when the morning star aligns, and the marked ones read the signs, 7 steps from altar's door, find the way beneath the floor. Or something like that. I thought it was just nonsense. A game to distract us from how scared we were. But Al was already moving, pulling another file from the desk drawer. He spread a document across the surface. Architectural plans, old and faded, with Sisters of Silence residential facility printed at the top. 7 steps from the altar's door. If that's literal. There's something hidden in the chapel, I finished. Something only the marked children would know to look for. Or something Isabella found and hid somewhere only another survivor would think to check. Al studied the blueprints, his finger tracing the chapel layout. She went back there. 2 weeks before she died, there's a charge on her credit card for a hotel in Rockford. She told me it was a gallery consultation, but she didn't take any of her curator materials. Just the burner phone and a backpack. My pulse quickened. What if she found something? Evidence, documents, proof of whatever was really happening there? Then where did she hide it? Al looked at me. The institution closed 4 years ago. The building's been abandoned. If she found physical evidence, she would have brought it back here or put it in the safety deposit box. Unless she couldn't risk moving it, I said. unless whatever she found was too dangerous to transport, so she hid it somewhere she knew only another survivor would find. Al's jaw tightened, following the rhyme. I moved to the desk, staring at the blueprints. The chapel was marked clearly, a rectangular space with the altar on the eastern wall. 7 steps from the altar's door. That would put you... I traced the distance with my finger. Right about here, against the north wall. Beneath the floor, Al added. Some kind of hidden compartment or crawl space. We stared at each other, the implications settling between us like a lit fuse. We have to go back, I said. To the institution. It's the only way to know what she found. It's also walking straight into exactly the kind of situation that got her killed. But even as Al said it, I could see the determination hardening in his expression. He wasn't going to let fear stop him. Not when he was this close to understanding why Isabella had died. Then we go prepared, I said. We go armed. We go with your people. But we go. Al studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face for something. Weakness, maybe, or doubt. Whatever he was looking for, he didn't find it. Tomorrow night, after dark, we'll need to move fast. If Isabella's killers have been monitoring the property, they'll know the moment we arrive, I finished. So we find what she hid, and we get out. Fast. He nodded once, then reached past me to close the file. His arm brushed mine, and I felt the heat of him even through my sweater. We were standing too close suddenly, the weight of the moment pressing us together in the quiet study. I could smell his cologne, that same bergamot and leather from the auction house, and something else underneath it. Whiskey and exhaustion and the sharp edge of grief that never quite faded. You should get some rest, he said, but he didn't move away. Tomorrow's going to be dangerous. I know. If something happens to you, if I get you killed chasing my wife's ghost... You won't, I interrupted. Isabella was looking for me for a reason. Maybe she knew I'd be the one to finish what she started. Al's expression softened slightly, the hard edges of the Mafia boss giving way to something more human, more broken. She would have liked you, he said quietly. You have the same way of looking at the world, like you're cataloging all the beautiful things while simultaneously planning how to survive the ugly ones. The compliment caught in my chest, unexpected and painful. He stepped back, creating distance between us again. The car leaves at 9. Be ready. I nodded and turned toward the door, then paused. Al? That rhyme Agnes used to sing. I just remembered the last line. He looked up. Only the marked shall find the gate, where the morning star decides their fate. I met his eyes. Whatever Isabella found, I don't think it's just evidence. I think it's something bigger. Something about what they were really doing to us there. Al's expression darkened. Then we find it, and we burn down everyone who had a hand in it. It should have sounded like empty bravado, a threat meant to comfort rather than convince. But looking at Al Rossi in his study, surrounded by his dead wife's investigation, and the weight of 2 years of unanswered grief, I believed him completely. Tomorrow we'd go back to the place that had branded us both, in different ways, through different people, but with the same permanent mark. And whatever we found there would either give us answers or get us killed. I went back to Isabella's room and finally fell into restless sleep, Agnes's rhyme playing on an endless loop in my head. When the morning star aligns, and the marked ones read the signs. The night after the auction house confrontation settled into a restless half-sleep. The house seemed to breathe with a life of its own. The Rose Room, once Isabella's sanctuary, now felt like a thin veil between past and present, between the woman who had died and the woman who now wore her scar. I lay on the silk-covered bed, the faint scent of jasmine and amber curling around me, and stared at the faint outline of the star on my wrist. It pulsed under the skin like a secret heartbeat. A soft rustle at the foot of the bed made me turn. A leather-bound journal lay there, its cover embossed with a simple cross. I hadn't seen it before. Mrs. Chen must have placed it there while I was at dinner. My fingers trembled as I opened it, the pages whispering as they turned. Isabella's handwriting was elegant, each letter formed with deliberate care. The first entry was dated 3 weeks before her death. June 12th. The chapel again. Father D's sermons are riddles, but I think I've found the key. The star is a map, not a symbol of salvation. I met with someone tonight, someone who knows the true purpose of the mark. He called himself Elias. He wore a ring with the same star, but his was set in silver, not iron. He said the children are more than victims. They are custodians of something hidden. He promised to show me where the bodies are buried. I'm scared, but I can't stop now. My breath caught. The journal continued, each entry a thread pulling me deeper into a web I had never imagined. June 15th. Elias took me to the old infirmary. The walls are lined with shelves of medical supplies, but behind one of them is a door I never noticed before. He said only the marked can open it. He gave me a small brass key, cold as ice. He warned me not to trust anyone, especially not the men who wear suits and think they own the city. He said the star knows where the bodies are buried, and that the truth will surface when the morning star aligns. June 18th. I'm meeting Elias again tonight. He's nervous. He says the people who run the institution are still active, that they've moved the operation underground. He mentioned a name, Victor Hale, someone high up in the archdiocese. I don't know if I can trust him, but I have no other leads. I'm writing this in case something happens to me. The last entry was a single line, written in a hurried hand. If you find this, know that the star is a compass. Follow the key. Trust no one but the one who bears the same mark. My heart hammered against my ribs. The journal was a map, a confession, a warning. I slipped out of the rose room, the journal clenched to my chest, and made my way down the marble stairs. The house was quiet, but the faint glow from Al's study seeped through the hallway, a beacon in the darkness. Al was there, sitting at his desk, the fire crackling behind him. He looked up as I entered, his eyes flickering with a mixture of fatigue and curiosity. "You found something," he said, his voice low, as if the walls might be listening. I placed the journal on the desk and opened it to the first entry. He read silently, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. "This Elias," he murmured. "A high-ranking informant? He sounds like someone inside the church hierarchy." "Victor Hale." He stopped, the name hanging in the air like a threat. Victor Hale is the auxiliary bishop of Chicago. He's been a vocal supporter of the archdiocese's charitable programs. If he's involved... He didn't finish the sentence. The implication was clear. The institution's reach stretched far beyond a forgotten orphanage in Rockford. "We need to find Elias," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "He has the key, the brass key. He knows where the bodies are buried." Al stood, the firelight catching the edge of his jaw. "We can't go to the police, not with Victor Hale's name in the mix. We need to move fast, before whoever killed Isabella realizes we're digging." He crossed to the window, looking out at the dark gardens. "There's a safe house in the South Loop, an old warehouse that used to be a storage facility for the archdiocese. Elias mentioned it once, in passing. It's where they keep the things they don't want anyone to see." He turned back to me, his eyes intense. "We go there tonight. We find the key, we find the bodies, and we bring Victor Hale to his knees." The plan was reckless, the odds stacked against us, but the journal had lit a fire in both of us that no amount of caution could extinguish. We gathered what we needed: a flashlight, a small pistol Al kept in a drawer, and the journal. Mrs. Chen appeared at the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Rossi, Miss Bellwether, the car is ready," she said, her voice calm, as if she were announcing a dinner reservation. We slipped out into the cold November night, the city's lights flickering like distant stars. The drive to the South Loop was a blur of streetlights and the occasional snowflake that melted on the windshield. Al's driver, the lean man from the auction house, kept his eyes on the road, his posture rigid. I could feel the tension in the car, a taut string ready to snap. When we arrived at the warehouse, it loomed like a forgotten cathedral of commerce. Its brick facade was cracked, windows boarded, and a faint glow leaked from a cracked door at the back. Al signaled his men to stay outside, their silhouettes merging with the shadows. Inside, the air was stale, the smell of old paper and rust filling my nostrils. We moved through aisles of stacked crates, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. In the far corner, behind a row of wooden pallets, a faint metallic glint caught my eye. "There," Al whispered, pointing. "That's the key." He knelt, his fingers brushing away dust to reveal a small brass key, exactly as Isabella had described. It was warm to the touch, as if it had been waiting for us. "Now what?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the hum of the old building. Al lifted the key, his thumb brushing the star embossed on its head. "We find the door it opens." We followed the narrow hallway to a wall that seemed solid, but a faint outline of a door was visible when the light hit it just right. Al inserted the key, and with a soft click, the hidden door swung open, revealing a cramped stairwell descending into darkness. The descent was steep, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, a dimly lit room opened before us. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes labeled in Latin: Sanctus, Caritas, Veritas. In the center of the room stood a large wooden chest, its surface scarred with the same star symbol that marked my wrist. Al approached it, his hand hovering over the lid. "Isabella must have hidden whatever she found in here," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of anticipation and dread. He lifted the lid, and a rush of stale air escaped. Inside lay stacks of documents, photographs, and a small leather-bound ledger. I pulled out a photograph, an image of a group of children, their faces blurred, but the star on their wrists unmistakable. Another photo showed a man in a bishop's robes, his hand resting on a child's shoulder, the star glining on his ring. "The ledger," Al said, flipping through pages filled with names, dates, and amounts of money. Payments to Victor Hale, to the Sisters of Silence, to a shell corporation called Stellar Holdings. My eyes widened. They were laundering money through the church, using the children as a cover. The star wasn't just a brand. It was a tracking device, a way to identify who was part of the network. Al's jaw tightened. And the bodies. He lifted a thick envelope, its seal broken. Inside were autopsy reports, each listing cause of death as accidental or undetermined. But the dates matched the names crossed out on Isabella's list. The final report was for a child named Lucia. Her death ruled a hit and run. Exactly the same pattern as Isabella's. A sudden crash echoed from the hallway above. The lean man's voice crackled over the radio. "They're here! We've been made!" Adrenaline surged through me. Al grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the exit. "We have to get out. This is more than we thought." We raced up the stairs, the hidden door slamming shut behind us as we burst into the main warehouse. The lean man and the heavy-built companion were already engaged in a fierce gunfight with shadowy figures in dark suits, men who moved with the precision of trained operatives. Al fired his pistol, the sound reverberating off the metal beams. I ducked behind a crate, my heart pounding, the journal still clenched in my hand. In the chaos, a figure lunged at Al, tackling him to the ground. I saw his hand slip, the pistol skidding across the concrete. Without thinking, I lunged forward, grabbing the gun and firing a warning shot that sent the attacker sprawling. Al scrambled to his feet, his eyes meeting mine with a fierce gratitude that cut through the fear. "We need to get the ledger out of here," he shouted over the gunfire. "It's our leverage." I nodded, slipping the ledger into my coat. The lean man covered us as we sprinted toward the back door, the cold night air hitting us like a slap. We burst into the street, the warehouse exploding behind us in a shower of sparks as someone set it ablaze. We didn't stop running until we were back in the safety of Al's SUV, the engine roaring as we sped away from the burning building. The city's skyline loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette against the night sky. Inside the car, the silence was heavy. Al stared at the ledger, his fingers tracing the names and numbers. I could see the weight of the world pressing down on him, the grief for Isabella mixing with a new, burning resolve. "You saved my life back there," he said quietly, his voice raw. I didn't think anyone could get that close to me without hurting me." I looked at him, at the man who had kidnapped me, threatened me, and now stood beside me in the middle of a war we barely understood. The scar on my wrist seemed to glow in the dim light, a reminder of the bond we shared. "Isabella trusted you," I whispered. "She trusted the star, the mark, to guide someone who could finish what she started." He turned his gaze to me, his dark eyes softening. "And now I'm trusting you." The car pulled into the driveway of his mansion, the gates closing behind us with a final resonant clang. We stepped out into the cold, the night air sharp against our faces. Al took my hand, his grip firm but gentle, and led me toward the house. Inside, the foyer was warm, the chandelier casting a golden glow that seemed almost mocking after the darkness we'd just escaped. Al stopped in front of the staircase, his eyes searching mine. "We have the ledger," he said, "but we need to know who else is involved. Victor Hale, Elias, the whole network. We can't do this alone." I nodded, feeling the weight of the journal and the ledger pressing against my chest. "We'll find them. Together." He stepped closer, the space between us shrinking. The tension that had built up over the night, fear, adrenaline, the shared danger, coiled into something else, something raw and undeniable. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his thumb lingering on the scar at my wrist. "Clara," he whispered, his voice a mixture of desperation and something softer. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I know I don't want to face it without you." My heart raced, the world narrowing to the space between us. I could feel the heat of his breath, the steady thump of his heart against my own. The night's horrors faded into the background as a different kind of urgency rose. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely a breath. "But I'm not alone anymore." He leaned in, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was both a promise and a plea. It was fierce, brief, and filled with the unspoken agreement that we would fight this together, that the star on our wrists would guide us through the darkness. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his eyes shining with a fierce light. "We'll bring them down," he said, his voice steadier now. "For Isabella. For the children who never got a chance. For us." I smiled, a small, genuine curve that felt foreign after weeks of fear. "For the star," I replied, tracing the symbol on his ring with my fingertip. The night stretched ahead, uncertain and dangerous, but for the first time since I'd left the Sisters of Silence, I felt a slimmer thread of hope. Al and I, bound by a scar and a secret, stood at the threshold of a battle that would either shatter the darkness or consume us both. The pact was sealed with a kiss, and the journey into the heart of the star's mystery had only just begun. The call came at 3 a.m, 2 days after we'd escaped the burning warehouse. I was in Isabella's study, poring over the ledger while Al worked his contacts, trying to verify the names without alerting Victor Hale's network. The burner phone, one of several Al kept for situations like this, vibrated against the mahogany desk with an urgency that made my skin prickle. "It's him," Al said, his voice tight as he read the message. "Elias, he wants to meet." I looked up from the columns of numbers that documented years of horror. After what happened at the warehouse? It could be a trap. It probably is. Al's jaw worked as he reread the message. But he says he has more evidence. Files that Isabella couldn't access. Names of the children who were sold. The word hung between us like a blade. Sold. Not adopted. Not placed. Sold. "Where?" I asked, already knowing I'd go regardless of the danger. The star on my wrist seemed to burn with its own urgency. "Holy Name Cathedral. Midnight Mass." Al's laugh was bitter. He has a sense of irony. At least. Holy Name Cathedral sat in the heart of Chicago like a Gothic reminder of faith's power and corruption's reach. We arrived separately. Al through the main entrance with 2 of his men stationed outside, me through the side door that led to the administrative offices. The cathedral was nearly empty at this hour, just a handful of late-night penitents scattered among the pews, their heads bowed in prayer or exhaustion. I found Elias in the 3rd row from the back, his profile sharp against the amber glow of votive candles. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he'd been running for a long time. When he turned to look at me, I saw the star, not on his wrist but on a ring, just as Isabella had described. "You're Clara," he said, not a question. "Isabella showed me your picture, from the institution's files." "You knew who I was all along," I said, sliding into the pew beside him. "You were looking for me." "Isabella was looking for all of you, the survivors. She thought if she could gather enough witnesses." He stopped, his eyes darting toward the confessionals. "We shouldn't stay long. They're watching." "Who's watching?" "The Order of the Morning Star. That's what they call themselves now. The institution was just one arm of something much larger." He pulled an envelope from his coat, his hands trembling. "These are shipping manifests. Children sent overseas. Your friend Agnes, she wasn't adopted. She was sent to Prague when she turned 18. My blood turned to ice. "She's alive?" "Was. 2 years ago. Same pattern as Isabella. Professional hit. No witnesses." His fingers drummed against the pew. "They're cleaning house, eliminating anyone who could testify. You're the last one on the Chicago list." Al appeared at the end of our row, his presence a dark comfort. "The files. Where are they?" Elias stood, gesturing toward the sacristy. "Hidden in the old records room. Bishop Hale doesn't know I have copies. Come on, we don't have much." The lights went out. Not gradually, not partially. Complete darkness descended on the cathedral like a shroud. The votive candles flickered and died as if snuffed by invisible hands. Someone screamed, one of the other late-night visitors, and then came the sound of doors slamming shut, the mechanical click of locks engaging. "Run!" Elias hissed, but it was too late. Emergency lights blazed to life, harsh and white. Illuminating figures in black tactical gear streaming in from every entrance. Not police. Their movements were too precise, too practiced. Private security. The Order's cleanup crew. Al's hand found mine in the chaos, pulling me toward the altar as gunfire erupted behind us. Elias ran in the opposite direction, toward the confessionals, but I saw him fall before he made it 3 steps, a dart protruding from his neck. "This way," Al growled, kicking open a door marked, "Authorized personnel only." We tumbled into a narrow hallway, our footsteps echoing off stone walls as shouts filled the cathedral behind us. My lungs burned as we ran, following the corridor deeper into the building's maze-like interior. A figure stepped out of the shadows ahead, a woman in a severe black suit. Her hair pulled back in a style I recognized with sickening clarity. Sister Catherine, though she looked nothing like the nun I remembered from the institution. The years had sharpened her features into something predatory. "Cecilia," she said, using my old name like a weapon. "You've caused us considerable trouble." Al raised his gun, but she smiled. "I wouldn't. We have the building surrounded. The only reason you're not already sedated is that we need her conscious for the transfer." "Transfer?" I stepped forward, rage overcoming fear. "You mean sale. That's what you did to us. Branded us like cattle and sold us to the highest bidder. Such crude language for such an elegant operation." Sister Catherine, or whoever she really was, adjusted her cuffs with practiced precision. "The Morning Star provides opportunities for exceptional children to serve exceptional purposes. You were meant for a collector in Switzerland, but you disappeared before the transaction could be completed. Very inconvenient." "Isabella found out," I said. "She was going to expose everything." Isabella was a romantic who thought she could change the world with a few documents and misplaced outrage. Her smile turned cruel. "We gave her the same opportunity we're giving you now. Come quietly, submit to relocation, and live. Fight, and end up like the others." Behind her, more figures emerged from doorways I hadn't noticed. We were trapped, caught between the cathedral's public face and its hidden corruption. Al's hand tightened on his weapon, but I could feel his calculation. Too many of them, not enough exits. "There's another option," a voice called from behind us. Marco stood in the doorway we'd entered through, Al's other men flanking him. "You let them go, or we turn this into a bloodbath that makes the evening news. Imagine the headlines. Shootout at Holy Name Cathedral. The investigation alone would destroy your operation." Sister Catherine's composure cracked slightly. "You wouldn't dare. The collateral damage." "Try me," Al said, his voice deadly calm. "I've got nothing left to lose except her." The standoff stretched taut, seconds feeling like hours. I could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had called 911. Sister Catherine heard them too, her jaw tightening with frustration. "This isn't over," she said, gesturing to her team. They melted back into the shadows with the same precision they'd appeared. "The Morning Star has been operating for 50 years. We've survived worse than a grieving widower and a runaway product." Product. That's all we'd ever been to them. She looked directly at me, her eyes cold as the chapel where I'd been branded. "You can run, Cecilia, but the mark always finds its way home. Every survivor bears our star. Every star leads back to us." Then she was gone, vanishing into the labyrinth of the cathedral's hidden passages. The sirens grew louder. Al pulled me toward the exit, Marco and his men forming a protective circle around us as we fled into the Chicago night. In the car, speeding back toward Lincoln Park, I couldn't stop shaking. The ledger, still hidden in Al's safe, suddenly felt insignificant compared to the scope of what we were facing. 50 years. How many children? How many sales? How many graves? "They know," I whispered. "They know exactly who I am, where I am. They've probably known since the moment you grabbed my wrist in the auction house." Al's profile was stone in the passing streetlights. "Then we hit them first. We take the ledger to the FBI, to the press, to anyone who'll listen." "You heard her. They've survived 50 years. They have contingencies, connections we can't even imagine. But they don't have Isabella's journal. They don't have the evidence from the warehouse. And they don't have you. He looked at me, his dark eyes fierce with determination. You're not a product, Clara. You're the witness they've been trying to silence. And now that they've shown their hand, we know exactly who we're fighting. The trap had been sprung, but we'd survived it. Barely. The Order of the Morning Star had revealed itself, and with that revelation came a terrible clarity. This war would end only when either they were destroyed or every last survivor was silenced. I touched the scar on my wrist, thinking of Agnes in Prague, of Isabella in her parking garage, of all the children whose names had been crossed off that list. The Morning Star had marked us all, but maybe, just maybe, it had also given us the power to burn the whole twisted constellation to the ground. The command center occupied the entirety of Al's basement, not a wine cellar or storage space, but a nerve center that would make federal agencies envious. Multiple screens lined one wall, displaying financial records, satellite imagery, and scrolling data I couldn't begin to decipher. Marco worked at one terminal while the lean man, who I'd learned was called Vincent, mapped connections between names from the ledger. This is where Isabella worked those last months, Al said, gesturing to a desk covered in photographs, documents, and reproductions of religious artwork. She was obsessed with these images, said they were the key to understanding the order's structure. I approached the desk, my curator instincts immediately engaged. The reproductions were all medieval and Renaissance religious art, illuminated manuscripts, altar pieces, devotional paintings. But there was something off about the selection. These weren't famous works. They were obscure pieces from private collections, many I'd never seen despite years of study. These are all depicting the Morning Star, I said, tracing my finger along a manuscript page showing Lucifer's fall. But look, I arranged several images in sequence. The star symbol changes. It evolves. Al leaned closer. What do you mean? Here, in this 12th century manuscript, the star has 5 points. By the 14th century, it's 8. But in these contemporary pieces, I pulled out photos of modern religious art commissioned for private chapels. It's back to 5, but with additional symbols embedded in each point. Vincent looked up from his terminal. Those symbols match shipping codes in the ledger. My blood went cold as the pattern crystallized. They're not just trafficking children. They're using religious art as a cataloging system. Each piece of art is a record, a bill of sale disguised as a devotional commission. I grabbed a magnifying glass from the desk, examining a photograph of a triptych that had supposedly been destroyed in a church fire. This angel's pose, it's not biblical. It's sign language, letters. My hands trembled as I decoded it. Agnes. This painting was Agnes's bill of sale. Jesus Christ, Marco breathed. The buyers commission religious art that contains encoded information about their purchase. I continued, the full horror dawning. The institution keeps the originals as insurance, proof of the transaction. That's why Isabella was researching these pieces. She'd figured out the code. Al pulled out a folder marked with Isabella's handwriting. She had a theory about the Vatican collection, that some of these pieces ended up there through donation, the church unknowingly harboring evidence of its own crimes. Not unknowingly, I said, remembering Sister Catherine's cold smile. The order has members throughout the hierarchy. They've been hiding evidence in plain sight for decades, turning atrocity into art. The room fell silent as the weight of the revelations settled. We weren't just fighting human traffickers. We were fighting an organization that had weaponized faith itself, turning sacred symbols into a commodity exchange written in the blood of children. The Sisters of Silence stood abandoned against the winter sky, its gray stone facade unchanged since my childhood, as if time itself had refused to touch this place of horrors. We approached at dawn, when the November frost still clung to the dead grass and the world felt suspended between night and day. Al's team, 12 men armed and grimly professional, surrounded the building while we entered through the chapel's side door, the one I'd used to escape 18 years ago. "The vault Isabella mentioned has to be beneath the altar," I whispered, leading Al through the familiar darkness. My body remembered this place, every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by the narrow windows. Father Dominic always said the star's truth was buried beneath God's throne. The chapel was smaller than my memories suggested, but the altar remained imposing, carved marble depicting the fall of Lucifer, the morning star cast from heaven. I ran my hands along its base, finding the hidden seam Isabella's journal had described. "7 steps from the altar's door," I murmured, pacing the distance Agnes's rhyme had taught us. My fingers found a slight depression in the floor, invisible unless you knew to look. "Here," I said, and Al's men moved forward with crowbars, prying up what appeared to be solid stone but was actually a carefully crafted door. Beneath it, metal stairs descended into darkness. The vault was a grotesque parody of a sacred space. Religious artifacts lined the walls, not the encoded artworks we'd discovered, but the originals, each one a record of a child sold. Filing cabinets stretched into the shadows, and at the center sat an ornate desk where someone had recently been working. Papers were still scattered across its surface, a fountain pen uncapped beside them. "Clara." Al's voice was tight. He stood before a wall covered in photographs. Hundreds of children, each marked with lot numbers like livestock. I found myself there, age 7. Hollow-eyed and clutching a rosary. Agnes was 3 photos over. Isabella's photo was marked with a red X. "Looking for something?" We spun toward the voice. Father Dominic stood at the bottom of the stairs, but not as I remembered him. The years had been kind. Too kind. He looked younger than he should, his silver hair artfully styled, his black suit impeccably tailored. Gone was the shabby priest who'd branded children in God's name. This was a businessman, wealthy and confident. "Father," I said, the word tasting like ash. "Not father anymore, Cecilia. I've moved beyond such small roles." He walked toward us with unhurried steps, seemingly unconcerned by Al's drawn weapon. "I'm Director Dominic Ashford now, managing partner of Stellar Holdings. We've diversified significantly since your time." "You murdered my wife," Al said, his voice deadly calm. Dominic smiled, the expression as cold as the chapel above. Isabella was becoming problematic. She'd decoded too much, understood our cataloging system. We offered her the same deal we offered all discovered assets: join us or be silenced. She chose poorly. "You shot her in a parking garage like an animal." "I shot her myself, yes. 2 bullets, close range. She died calling your name." Dominic's eyes glittered with something that might have been pleasure. "I wanted her to know it was personal. She'd cost us 3 major transactions with her meddling." Al's finger moved to the trigger, but Dominic held up a hand. "I wouldn't. My men have the building surrounded. You're only alive because I'm curious about Cecilia. Our lost lamb, returned at last." "I was never yours," I spat. "The star on your wrist suggests otherwise. You all belong to us from the moment we marked you. Some served their purpose early, sold to collectors who appreciated unique acquisitions. Others, like Isabella, we allowed to age into different kinds of assets. Marriage to a crime boss provided excellent leverage until she forgot her place." He moved to the desk, picking up a leather journal. "Did you know your buyer is still interested? Herr Kaufmann in Zurich has been waiting 23 years for his acquisition. The agreement still stands." My skin crawled. "You're insane." "I'm a businessman, and you're interrupting a very profitable operation that survived 3 papal administrations and countless investigations." He pressed something beneath the desk, and I heard locks engaging above us. No one leaves until we conclude our business. That's when I noticed it. The pattern in the floor tiles. The same constellation from the star room, barely visible unless you knew to look. Each star marked a pressure point. Agnes's rhyme echoed in my memory. Only the marked shall find the gate, where the morning star decides their fate. Al, I said quietly. When I say run, go left. Dominic was still talking, explaining the Order's reach, their connections in Rome, their plans to expand into Eastern Europe. His arrogance made him careless. He didn't notice me positioning myself on the constellation's central star, the morning star itself. I pressed down with my full weight, and the floor responded. The mechanism was old but well-maintained. Hidden panels opened in the walls, revealing not weapons but water, pipes that hadn't been updated since the building's construction, now rupturing with decades of pressure. The vault began flooding immediately, ice-cold water that sent everyone scrambling. "The files!" Dominic roared, abandoning his composure as he rushed to save the filing cabinets. Al grabbed an armful of ledgers while I went for the photographs, stuffing them into a waterproof bag I'd hidden in my coat. The water was already knee-deep, rising fast. Vincent's voice crackled over the radio. They'd breached the upper locks, but we had minutes at most before the basement completely flooded. Dominic lunged for me, his hands going for my throat, but the water made him clumsy. Al's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling into the freezing flood. We ran for the stairs as Dominic screamed behind us, watching 50 years of evidence dissolve into pulp and ink. We emerged, gasping into the chapel, Marco pulling us toward the exit as the building's foundation groaned. Behind us, the altar cracked and collapsed into the flooded vault, taking the Order's secrets with it. But not all of them. The photographs and ledgers we'd saved would be enough. Enough to destroy Stellar Holdings. Enough to expose the network. Enough to ensure no more children would bear the Morning Star's brand. In the SUV, racing away from the collapsing institution, Al pulled me close. "He confessed," he said. "Vincent recorded everything. Isabella's murder, the trafficking, all of it." I looked back at the Sisters of Silence one last time as its eastern wall buckled and fell. The morning star had finally aligned, just not in the way the Order had intended. Their constellation was collapsing, and we were the gravity that would pull it all down. The Chicago Tribune ran the story on a cold Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after the Sisters of Silence collapsed into its own flooded vault. The headline stretched across the front page. 50 years of silence, Vatican-connected trafficking ring exposed. Below it, Dominic Ashford's arrest photo showed a man 20 years older than he'd looked in that basement, as if the water had washed away whatever dark magic had preserved him. I stood in Al's study, watching the news coverage on 3 different screens. FBI raids in 6 cities. Cardinal Victor Hale led away in handcuffs from his Gold Coast residence. Interpol freezing Stellar Holdings accounts across Europe. The photographs we'd saved, those haunted children's faces, now evidence in the largest trafficking investigation in church history. "Herr Kaufmann was arrested this morning," Vincent said from his terminal. Swiss authorities found 14 children in his estate, living ones. My knees nearly buckled. Al steadied me, his hand warm against my back. "They're safe now, because of what you did." "Because of what Isabella started," I corrected. The November sky was the color of old pewter as we drove to Graceland Cemetery. Al had been here countless times. The groundskeepers nodded respectfully as we passed. But this was my first visit to Isabella's grave. She lay in the Rossi family plot, her headstone simple black marble with only her name and dates. No epithets, no beloved wife, nothing that tried to capture who she'd been. Al set white roses against the stone, their petals stark against the dark marble. I placed Agnes's photograph beside them. The only image I'd kept from the vault, showing her at 7, still believing rescue might come. Dominic's lawyer is trying to claim insanity, Al said, his voice rough. Says the flooding damaged his mind, that his confession was delusional. It won't work. I touched the scar on my wrist, hidden now beneath wool and resolve. Too many witnesses, too much evidence. The other survivors they found, the ones from Berlin and Prague, they're testifying. 23 children recovered so far, Al said. Vincent thinks there might be more. The order had franchises we're still uncovering. We stood in silence, the wind cutting through the cemetery with surgical precision. Isabella's grave faced east, toward the lake, toward the sunrise she'd never see. I wondered if she'd known, those last weeks, how close she'd been to breaking it all open. If she'd suspected Dominic would come for her personally. She would have liked knowing you finished it, Al said, reading my thoughts. That another survivor brought them down. We brought them down, I said. Your resources, your connections. Without those, without you, I'd still be chasing shadows. He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes intense. Clara, what will you do now? The curator position at the Art Institute is still yours if you want it. You could go back to your old life, or what's left of it. I'd been dreading this conversation, this moment of choice. For 2 weeks I'd been living in a suspended state, not quite Al's guest, not quite his partner, something undefined and temporary. The Rose Room still held Isabella's ghost, but it had become mine too. Filled now with my books, my clothes, my own perfume bottles alongside hers. My old life was an illusion, I said. A carefully constructed hiding place. I thought if I surrounded myself with enough beauty, enough culture, enough normalcy, I could forget what happened in that institution. But Isabella knew better. She knew the only way to truly escape was to turn around and fight. Al's jaw tightened. This life, my life, it's dangerous. You've seen that. There will always be enemies, always be violence at the edges. It's not the quiet existence you planned. The quiet existence was killing me slowly, I admitted. Panic attacks on the L, therapy sessions where I couldn't tell the truth, relationships I sabotaged because letting anyone close meant risking they'd see the scar and ask questions. At least with you, with this, I don't have to hide. A crow cawed from a nearby oak, the sound sharp in the winter air. Al reached out, his fingers finding mine, warm despite the cold. Isabella's foundation needs a director, he said. Someone who understands what those children survived, who can ensure they're not just rescued but rebuilt. The position comes with certain securities. My protection, my resources, and a mandate to hunt down every last fragment of the order. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a purpose. His thumb traced the scar on my wrist through my glove. And maybe something more. I looked at Isabella's headstone, at the roses already being claimed by frost, at Agnes's photograph watching us with eyes that had seen too much. The old Clara would have run, found another city, another identity, another careful facade to hide behind. But that Clara had died in the auction house when Al grabbed my wrist and refused to let go. The foundation will need offices, I said. Somewhere prominent, visible. Let them know we're not hiding anymore. The Stellar Holdings building is being seized. We could take the top floor. Poetic justice. I squeezed his hand. Isabella would appreciate that. Is that a yes? I turned from the grave to face him fully, this man who'd kidnapped me into purpose, who'd shown me that some fights were worth the scars they left. Someone needs to catalog the recovered artwork, decode the remaining sales, trace the money trails. My curator skills, your connections. We could dismantle their entire network piece by piece. That could take years, Al warned. Good, I said. I've got years, and I'm tired of spending them afraid. He pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me in the middle of that cemetery, surrounded by the dead and the weight of our shared purpose. I could feel his heartbeat through his coat, steady and sure. She saved us both, he said into my hair. Isabella. Her death brought us together, gave us this mission. Then we honor her by finishing it. Every child branded, every life sold, every secret buried. We dig them all up and drag them into the light. The wind picked up, scattering the rose petals across the frozen ground like drops of blood on snow. But I wasn't cold anymore. The scar on my wrist, hidden beneath layers of wool and determination, no longer felt like a mark of ownership. It was evidence, testimony, a reminder that survival could become something more if you were brave enough to stop running. Al and I walked back through the cemetery together, our footsteps synchronized on the gravel path. Behind us, Isabella's grave stood sentinel in the growing dusk, watching over a fight that was far from over. The order of the morning star had fallen, but its constellations still mapped a darkness we'd spend years navigating. I'd found my place at last, not in safety or silence, but in the dangerous space between justice and vengeance, between the life I'd planned and the one I'd chosen. Al's hand in mine was warm and solid, an anchor in the storm we were about to unleash on everyone who'd profited from children's pain. The morning star had marked us all, but we would decide what that mark meant. Not ownership, not shame, but a declaration of war against anyone who thought children could be cataloged and sold like art. Isabella's legacy would be our loyalty to that cause. And our love, unexpected, forged in darkness, sealed with shared scars, would be the light that guided us through. If you felt something while watching, please subscribe. That's how I know these stories mean something to you. Even on your TV, take a second to join our community of story lovers. Your support keeps this world of emotions alive.